Hi, and welcome to Esports Referee Activities. My name is Leia, and as you can probably guess, I am an esports referee. I have been a part of big offline finals and small online qualifiers, but I also have experience in training other referees and conducting workshops for both adults and children. Before we go into the activities a little bit more, I just quickly want to introduce myself and the organization I am representing today. Now for that, I want to tell you a little story about how I first came into contact with the term esports. Because it's actually kind of funny. It wasn't through like friends or my love for gaming or even the news. No, about 6 years ago, I first watched the documentary All Work, All Play that focuses on professional League of Legends players. And I have to say, when I watched it, I was blown away by the esports aspect, not by League of Legends. I tried that game once, didn't understand it, never touched it again. But I was so impressed with the huge tournaments and the amounts of people that were involved. Like, I couldn't believe that there was this amazing community that I had never even heard of. But it wouldn't actually be until like 2 years later that I started to work in esports. At first, I didn't work as a referee, I worked with referees, and then I decided to become one myself. And the organization that trains referees in Austria is the ESVÖ, or the Austrian Esports Federation. Now this federation was founded in 2007, but one of its biggest accomplishments actually happened the year before, when it was still in the planning phase. Because you see, at that time there was a discussion that erupted in Germany about whether violent video games are responsible for violent behavior in kids and teens. Whilst Germany banned said video games, Austria decided to try a different approach, and we wanted to educate people. That was the main goal, basically. And so the biggest gaming event of Austria was founded, Game City. And to this day, it is all about education, and so Game City is free. Then a year later, so 2008, Austria was part of the founders of the IESF, so the International Esports Federation. From 2010, we started to train esports referees. So that was also when the first licensed referees came to be, in a way. But it actually would still take years until esports became known in the mainstream. To be fair, this is kind of Austria's fault. We're a little slow with innovation. But then 2017 was the year when the biggest Austrian leagues were founded. On one hand, you have the E-Bundesliga, which is a FIFA tournament that includes all football clubs in Austria. And then on the other hand, of course, the I1 Esports League, which is the biggest league that we have with, obviously, the biggest prize pool. Now that we've talked a little bit about myself, I wanted to just answer a very simple question. What is an esports referee? Now, to some of you, this question is obsolete because you know how esports tournaments come to be. But some of you may wonder, like, why do you even need an esports referee? It's not like you go up on stage and you're like, you get a point, you get a penalty. We have a game that does that for us, right? Which fortunately means that human mistakes are kept at a minimum. So it's not like in traditional sports where referees have a lot of pressure but also responsibility. No, our tasks are more focused on the events themselves. So we are organizers, we are event managers, we assist players, and of course we also dismantle and set up the venue. Now I will go into like the activities more in detail, but before that I just want to quickly talk about what are the requirements for being an esports referee. Now, if you look at this list, you will see that on one hand you need an interest in esports. Duh. And on the other hand, you should be a team player. Now, I've purposefully kept this list quite short because I'm a firm believer that you do not need any special skills for being an esports referee. Of course, if you have in-depth knowledge in the games that you referee, that's a plus. If you are good with computers and you know hot fixes, you can fix sound problems and display issues, that's also a plus. But it's not a necessity. And I know this because when I started out, I was quite the noob, definitely. Like the games that I refereed, Fortnite, League of Legends, FIFA, I've never played them seriously. And even though, of course, I know more now than I did then, I would still say that it's not really a necessity to play these games, you know? And the same goes for computer skills. Like, I remember one of my first tournaments where I refereed, and one of the kids asked me how to put his game into full screen. That was the only technical advice I could give that day, even though I will say I was quite proud. Of course, now I know more 3 years later, but I am still a firm believer that the most important aspect of being an esports referee, as cheesy as it may sound, is teamwork. Because you will never be alone as a referee. You will always have a team around you. So if you have questions or if there's an issue you can't fix, you can talk to the team and then you can discuss it and then you can find a solution together. And I think, yeah, that's definitely the most important thing. So how about we talk about how to become an esports referee next? Now, I will say that these experiences these experiences, of course, differ depending on where you live. Like, my experience comes from being trained in Austria by the ESVÖ. And the short answer to this actually is that I signed up to a workshop. I attended the workshop and then I went home with a certificate of said workshop. But I guess what you guys are more interested in is what exactly did I learn there? Of course, I can't go through the whole workshop. I only have 20 minutes, but I've grouped it into 3 parts. So part number 1 would be learning about your national esports community. So the events that you have, the different partners that you have, companies who are involved, and also different organizations, basically. Part number 2 is tournament structure. Now, if you're a football fan, you probably already know this because esports structures and traditional sports structures are the same. I would say there are 2 that are super common and that you need to know. One is the group stage, also called round robin, which basically means that every participant fights every participant once. And then you have the elimination stage, which is also known as knockout, where if you lose once, you're out. And of course, now these are just like the basics. There are a lot of variations of these, but they're the most common and definitely should be known by any referee. And then lastly, this is probably the least expected, and that is social skills. Because actually, as an esports referee, you'll be working with very many different people. For example, you'll maybe work with an organizer who doesn't have any experience with esports events. Or then on the other hand, you'll referee a Fortnite tournament and you'll have to show a kid how he can put his @ in his email address. So as an esports referee, it is very important to stay friendly and polite, because if you can't work with these people, then you definitely shouldn't work in esports. So finally, we have reached the part of the presentations where I'm going to talk to you about what is it that an esports referee does. As I've hinted before, being an esports referee means that you do very many different jobs. But for now, we're going to talk about offline events, and I've separated this into 3 parts. The first would be pre-event tasks, because actually, as an esports referee, you don't only supervise the event itself, but sometimes you'll actually help with the organization. So, this is especially true if the organizers themselves don't really have much experience with this. And then you'll have to help them with everything. And I mean everything, like picking out the venue, setting up the equipment, figuring out a timetable, writing a rule book, and of course, picking the right tournament structure. And this is just the start, this is an overview. But always keep in mind that even though obviously you should always voice your concerns, the organizers will make the final decisions. And you may not always be happy with them, but that's just something that you'll have to accept, and hopefully it'll be better the next time. Now, when we talk about the event itself, a lot of being an esports referee means just being present. That might sound a little weird, but what I mean with that is that you stand while the players play their games. You watch them, you watch the game, and if there are any issues, you'll be able to quickly intervene. And while you do that, it's also very important that you stick to the timetable. That is something that I would say is probably one of the most important parts of any tournament. because especially with video games, it can be like some video games have a tendency to take longer than anticipated, and sometimes like you'll lose hours, which is very unfortunate. But if you're not doing this, you're probably assisting players because that's also a very big part of being an esports referee. And I mean, you assist them from like 0 to 100. So we start off with the check-in phase. You know, you take the details, you check the IDs, you make sure that the age restrictions are being upheld. And then in the venue, you'll usually assist with technical problems, you'll answer general questions. And again, you make sure that everyone's seated on time, you know, knows where they have to be, who they have to fight, etc. And then, like, this is very rare, but sometimes you will have to penalize inappropriate behavior. By that, I mean anything from being loud and obnoxious to even sabotaging and cheating. Although I will say that this is quite rare, but because it's a very serious issue, I would always recommend that you discuss this type of stuff with the team or you follow the guidelines that are given by the organizers. And then lastly, post-event tasks. Because of course, while everyone is going home celebrating or not celebrating, we esports referees, we stay and we help dismantling everything. So, you know, if you want to learn cable management, yeah, that is the job for you. Every referee knows the elbow technique into how to wire long cables. And when everything's like put together and stored for the next event, there's only one last thing to do, and that is feedback. And trust me, feedback is essential. It's so important that you make sure to give honest answers to like the organizers' questions, because only then will the event get better over time. Like for example, I remember that one time we had an event where we ordered Subway 3 days in a row, and like on the last day we just couldn't see the sandwiches anymore. So next time we had a bunch of unhealthy options to choose from. So yeah, feedback definitely works, so I would always recommend giving it. So now we've talked about like your most common esports referee activities, but those are not the only ones. No, of course not. There are also other activities that you might do. For example, if you are live on Twitch or on a different platform, you could moderate the Twitch chat. Or sometimes they'll even ask you to supervise the stream. So you'll maybe change scenes or type in like the new players' names that are shown on stream. Sometimes even the organizers will ask you to document the event. So you'll grab a camera and you'll take pictures and videos. Or if you're a little bit more experienced, maybe they'll ask you to moderate the event. So that means that you'll have a mic and you will, you know, like tell the players when they have to be seated again, or you'll count down the next match. But what if you're not at a tournament? Now, I may be a little bit biased here because this is a little bit like my specialty, but I have conducted a lot of trainings and workshops. So part of being an esports referee is also teaching. Of course, training other referees. I mean, that one's pretty obvious, I guess. But also, I have conducted workshops for adults, you know, people who wanted to learn more about esports and gaming in general. So they could use that knowledge with the children that they taught. But also I have conducted workshops with kids. We have, for example, a series where we combine like digital tools and non-digital tools to kind of show the difference. Like, for example, we use Lego blocks and Minecraft blocks. And then, of course, like during the pandemic, I've conducted a lot of online workshops as well that focused on like, you know, Zoom calls or lighting, or even how to integrate like gaming into your online communication, stuff like that, basically. And I am a firm believer that education is a key thing in gaming and that it has to be utilized more. I mean, there have been a dozen studies that have proven that children learn better with gaming. And so I kind of feel like we need to let go of all the prejudice that our community has and start to really use the opportunities that it gives us, because let's be honest, the future of gaming definitely involves education and it could make our life so much easier. Now, speaking of opportunities, there's something I haven't yet discussed with you, and that is online events. Now, this is super unique to the esports sector or gaming community. And I don't think I have to tell you why it's important. I mean, we are in the midst of a global pandemic. But This also means that as an esports referee, you might be asked to work from home. Now, online tournaments are very different from offline tournaments, and the most important aspect is the tournament tool that you use, because this is where like the tournament structure will be displayed. This is where you see the matchups. This is where players or yourself can like put in the results. So it's very important to familiarize yourself with this, because especially in the beginning, an online tournament can be very stressful because you'll have like a dozen matches that you have to supervise at once, which basically means that you have to chat with the players and you'll have to make sure that they are present, that they can connect with each other, and that they've started playing. Now, if all three apply, then this chat is fine. Like, you can leave it until the game is finished. But with online tournaments, there are 3 problems that occur, yeah, most commonly. And that is, firstly, that players don't show up. To be fair, this isn't really like a huge problem, because you basically just disqualify them. You'll have to like set a time at which players will be disqualified. And sometimes even both players won't show up. So you disqualify one, then you let the other one move on, and then you disqualify the second one. The second problem is a lot more time consuming and also very common, and that is connection issues. 2 players who cannot connect, so they cannot start a game. This is so common that you usually have some type of guideline that addresses these problems, but you should always make sure that you like stick to these matches and make sure that you find a solution, because, well, if one game delays, that can mean that the whole tournament at the end will be delayed by hours. I'm not speaking from experience. Yeah, so please make sure that you stick to the timetable. And then lastly, well, remember when I said cheating and sabotaging isn't common? Well, with online tournaments, it's definitely more common, because players will just put in the wrong results or they will fake their photographic evidence. To be fair, it is usually quite obvious when this happens, because the other player will usually dispute the claim. But sometimes they don't until like an hour later. That actually happened with us, that a player who would have won didn't tell us that the wrong result was put in until like an hour later, and then it was too late. Like, we couldn't dismantle the whole tournament at that point. So I would always recommend to checking in with the players and the results, like double checking them, writing in the chat, hey, is this the result? Are you okay with this? Kind of like that. Even though many players, they won't answer if they agree. But sometimes, sometimes it can help. Okay. So we're actually nearing the end of the presentation, but I just quickly want to go through a few tips for referees, kind of like both like for anyone who wants to pursue a career as a referee. These things can be very useful. Number 1, you should hold meetings before a tournament. This one, it can be online or offline, like whatever you feel comfortable with, but giving like your colleagues and the organizers themselves maybe a chance to ask questions and just go through the timetable itself is very, very crucial. Sometimes, often you will do this right before the tournament, although I would usually recommend you do it a little bit before, because maybe like new questions will arise in the time and stuff like that. So yeah. Then next, I shouldn't have to say this, but make sure you update everything. This can be so annoying when you set up at an event and then you realize there's like a 20 gigabyte update. This is a very rare situation, but it can happen, And always pack spare equipment, so cables and controllers. Also, do not use plugs that have on and off switches. You will thank me later. For referees, make sure you wear comfortable clothes and shoes, because I've said before, you're gonna be walking a lot. And then this one's also very important. Make sure that you don't discuss issues in front of players. Like, it's fine to disagree with one another, but if you are in front of players and, also organizers and stuff, you should always stand as a unit. You're a team, as I've said before. And then 2 things that I would recommend for online tournaments. Of course, as I've said, adhere to the timetable. Like, this is so important with online tournaments. It can happen so fast that you need to stay like 2 hours later than anticipated, which is really annoying. And then also you should assign a designated Discord referee. there will be questions pouring in, like you wouldn't believe. So many questions and always the same question. So make sure that you have someone that is only working on this. Okay, so we're nearing the end. But after I've explained all of this, I just quickly wanted to go through why would you even want to be an esports referee? Because yeah, truth be told, it can be physically and mentally exhausting. Physically because you stand a long time and events can take like 10+ hours, multiple days in a row. And then mentally exhausting because you have to, assist players, answer the same questions over and over, and sometimes you even have to endure rude behavior. But to be honest, it is all worth it if you get to do it with people that love esports just as much as you do. Like honestly, even though I am a woman, so I am definitely we are few in numbers when it comes to referees, but I have honestly never felt so at home with any community than I do with the esports community. I've met so many amazing people and it's been so great connecting with new people, trying out new things and just generally, being part of a team. So, if you have the opportunity, I would always recommend that you hold annual meetings for referees. For example, we are actually meeting next week and we're going to go play laser tag, bowling, and then for dinner. So this is it. This is the end. I really hope that you learned something new and thank you so much for tuning in. Also, thank you to the organizers for giving me this opportunity. It's honestly been a blast and I wish everyone a lot of fun for the rest of the summit. Take care.